This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I am super excited for today's guest. Joe Cardona is a long snapper for the New England Patriots, but most importantly, played on my favorite football team, the college football team for the United States Naval Academy, a graduate of 2014 or 15, Joe?
2015.
2015 from the Academy. And we're thrilled to have you on the Resilient Life. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. It's a pleasure and an honor, obviously. And I'm pumped.
So let's give a little background for the audience. You were born and raised in the San Diego area, which obviously has a strong Navy presence. Did that influence your decision to go to the Naval Academy? And what ultimately led you to Navy?
Yeah, growing up in San Diego, you're essentially surrounded by the military, and I think that was my, initial introduction to the military. My dad was an enlisted sailor, reservist, DoD civilian. I grew up going. When I went to work with my dad, it was going to ships and going and being on base and all that stuff. So I was ingrained in that. You grow up in San Diego, you see the ships, you see fighter jets overhead. It's impossible to ignore, and ultimately that led me to once the opportunity came to go to the Naval Academy, it was a no-brainer.
So when did you start playing football?
Yeah, I started playing football really young, probably younger than I'd recommend people start playing football now, but it was all I wanted to do. There's a picture of me when I was like 2 years old, and I was wearing my older brother's football pads. So I was hooked. I really enjoyed, that aspect of things. And I really wanted to be a part of the sport, at a really young age. And, I grew up, I don't think I've had a football season, or I've had a fall without a football season, in 25 years. So
yeah, I have a 7-year-old son who we have not put into football yet by recommendation, actually also from the Navy head coach, Coach Ken, I had on the podcast. And I kind of asked him, I'm like, we haven't put him in football yet. He's like, that's good. You don't need to put him in yet. And so I think we're going to start him in flag next year. But, my brother played football, and it was the same thing probably as you. He had pads on at like 5 years old. Back in the day, that's how we did it, right?
Yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, I'm sure there were some benefits that came about from me playing at such a young age, but ultimately, I think not even the risk outweighs the reward. Like if you're a young player, if you're a young football player, if you play a lot of sports and you can and spend a lot of time doing a lot of different things athletically, that's the best thing for you. So, I'd say, that middle school age is probably the sweet spot to get a little exposure before school, but, that's up to each individual parent, I suppose.
Yeah. So tell us about your time at the Academy, most specifically playing football there. My favorite day of the year is Army Navy. There is just, and I will bring people purposefully to Army Navy games that have never experienced it, because I'm like, if you experience any football game, like it has to be this one. And your time at Navy, you guys won all 4 years, which is that's a big deal. And you were part of the streak. So tell us a little bit about that time and Well, let's start here. Tell us a little bit about plebe year, because if you don't know much about the Naval Academy, um, your freshman year, plebe year, as they call it, is kind of a wake up call. It's you get hit very quickly with the realities of what you've gotten yourself into. So much so, I tell the story that Travis's plebe year at Navy, he actually left. He left in December and quit the Naval Academy. Ended up going back, but that's just how challenging it is. So, what was it like for you when you first stepped on the grounds in Annapolis?
Yeah, no, I think really my journey there started because I went to the prep school. So I went to Naval Academy Prep School, NAPS, up in Newport, Rhode Island, and I got absolutely punched in the face there. I was a San Diego kid that like went out to Newport. I was expecting big D1 college football that I saw and was recruited to play at the Naval Academy. And then next thing I'm in a tiny little 300 person basically miniature school, taking 4 classes in the driving wind and the freezing weather up here in Newport, and really getting challenged in a lot of ways outside of just the typical college football player experience. One, it was the humbling experience of being playing against like college JV teams initially. And then also I had a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who was he was a former drill instructor, guy was as intense as anybody, Gunnery Sergeant Ford. And he was a hard ass, and he really trained me up. And I'd say that experience, it prepared me for plebe year, certainly. But I'd say plebe year was a challenge in itself because, you go through plebe summer, and that's the basic military training, indoctrination phase into the Navy. So you're doing kind of boot camp style workouts, boot camp style activities for 6 weeks, and then you go to football training camp at the end of it. And I think as an athlete, it's not so much that the workouts are necessarily challenging during plebe summer, but they're changing the way in which your body is structured a little bit. You're running 7 miles instead of 70 yards. Like, it's a totally different way of training. And I played right off the bat at the Naval Academy. I earned the starting job, but I wasn't in real shape because I had just gone through plebe summer. I mean, I probably was in the best shape of my life, but I wasn't in football shape.
Right.
I was like 205 pounds playing, on the line of this punt team. Like, I was way too small to be out there. I remember my first year of college football, I was like, how am I going to make it through 4 years of this? And then couple that with taking chemistry and, calculus, and not like the intro courses. These are the advanced courses. And I was definitely, the term drinking from a fire hose. I was drinking from a fire hose. I was really swimming in it my freshman year there at the academy. So that was it's a wake up call. It's a humbling experience. Absolutely. You think you're somebody. You think you're somebody special coming from your small town, or you're wherever you're from, and you go to the Naval Academy, and everybody has that moment where you feel like you're not good enough. You feel like you weren't ready. But ultimately, that's what the Naval Academy is meant to do. It's meant to challenge you. It's meant to make you fail, so that you have to be confronted and you have to force yourself to push through it.
Absolutely. So, talk about the first time you played Army, because for all Naval Academy athletes, um, there's the season and then there's Army Navy. Um, I don't know, arguably, which is more important. I've seen coaches get fired and have winning seasons for 5 years, but they can't beat Army, so they're out of there. So it's a big deal. And it is without being, you know, without sounding contrived. You see the memes that, everybody on the field is going to go and serve the country, is willing to die and protect and serve. And so there's this whole idea that there's these kids, because they are your kids, you're out there and you're playing a game, but at the end of the day, you guys are going to be standing side by side serving together. So there's something really special about that. But tell us about what that felt like the first time you walked out to play Army. Like you said, you started your freshman year, so you weren't sitting on the sidelines. I'm thinking, was your first year, most of the games are in Philadelphia. Do you remember your freshman year? Were you playing in Philly?
So my freshman year, we were actually in DC. So we were
Okay.
at FedEx. But you roll up to a professional football stadium. That year we didn't have the greatest record. I think we were 5-6 we were 4-7 going into the game. We lost a lot of close games. But Navy football seasons are defined by playing Army Navy, and that. And when you're 4-7 going into a 3-week, they call it Army camp. So it's just like football, just like training camp at the beginning of the year. You just started over again, but with cold weather, and it's the hardest, most arduous practices of the Navy football season because you're preparing for that huge game. And I've played in a lot of big games since, and we could get into some of those aspects, but I'd say that the hardest thing about playing Army, and really it goes both ways, is both teams are so evenly matched. They're getting the same caliber of student, the same caliber of athlete. They have all these students, maybe besides me, we're getting recruited by both schools. But that being said, you're so well matched. You basically run the same offense, you run the same defenses, you run the same schemes. It's just one-on-one, a fight every single play. And that's what we knew you were going into, but you didn't know exactly how the atmosphere would be, exactly how that your initial reaction to the game would be. I remember being so nervous for that game that on the bus ride there, I thought to myself, okay, I only have to do 3 more years of playing football and being this stressed out about long snapping. I thought it was ridiculous. I look back on it after 7 years in the NFL. I'm like, I had so much more football to play. But at that point in time, I was so nervous on that bus ride over because I grew up watching Army Navy. Like being the son of an enlisted sailor, like my dad would turn on Army Navy, and it'd be, like you said, the biggest game of the year, because of all those reasons, of all those ceremonial reasons, and every one of those adages rings true. It's an intimidating atmosphere for sure.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine that on that bus as you were pulling up, you ever were thinking that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is the biggest thing, but not realizing what your career was going to lead to. Like you said, you've played in some other pretty big games. So let's talk about, you do 4 years at Navy. And for those that don't know, when you go to a service academy, you are required to serve your country for 5 years. At the Naval Academy, you can choose to go into the Navy or the Marine Corps. But that's a requirement. I mean, that's frankly your pay. You're paying to go to school by serving your country. And there are a very, very small group of individuals that have the opportunity to play professional sports out of service academies. I think some of the most famous from the Naval Academy are David Robinson in basketball. Is that right? And then
Yeah.
Roger Staubach with football. And Joe Cardona gets that same opportunity. So how does that happen? Because I'd love to know what that process looks like because you've got like service selections, everybody's talking about, and it's 2015 when you're graduating. We're in the middle of war, so it's even more elevated in the need for men and women to put on the uniform. How does the process start where it looks like you're going to have this opportunity to go professional?
Yeah, no, and I mean that's a great question. And there's a lot of times that I didn't ever think I'd play in the NFL. I was like I alluded to earlier, I was an undersized, niche position. Didn't even get recruited to come play at the Naval Academy directly. I had to go to the prep school. Like never once did I ever think I would play in the NFL. Just point blank, like I never thought I would ever see a down in the NFL, and going to the Naval Academy was my way of, you know, fulfilling this goal of service, of becoming an officer, and really, elevating, my career personally, as from what a 18-year-old can understand. I knew essentially from talking to my dad is he was enlisted. He's like, you go to the academy, you become an officer, but you don't just become an officer, you become an officer that graduated from the Naval Academy. And I understood that at the very least. Now there was a couple moments throughout school that I started as a freshman. Football was still moving really fast for me. And then I continued to play, continue to get better and improve. And then it was around, my right at the beginning of junior year, we take physicals to see, what we can and can't do in the service. They're called pre-commissioning physicals. Now, I said I grew up in San Diego. I grew up around Miramar and all the jets flying over. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't really tell a lot of people because you had to get really good grades, and I wasn't getting really good grades. But I was hoping that I could be, a jet pilot one day, get an aviation contract, and go down to Pensacola and, and fly jets one day. Now, during that physical, they looked at me, they took all my measurements, and they said, you can't be a jet pilot because your torso is too long, and if you have to eject, maybe not all of you is going to make it out. And they alluded to my essentially, yeah, something would come off on the exiting a cockpit, and I was like, okay, understood. I don't want to do that. I get it. I don't fit. There are taller pilots than me. I just, whatever proportionality didn't work. But it was at that moment I kind of started looking around. I was like, all right, well, I got to figure out something else to do. Because what I came here to do is not fitting, the plan. But I looked around college football. I knew I'd just started for 2 years, and then I started comparing myself to my peers, and I said, I'm probably better than these guys. And at that point, I started comparing myself to guys in the NFL. I was like, all right, I'll have to gain some weight, but I think I got the physical tools to do it. So that was the moment I kind of realized I could physically play in the NFL. And I just wanted to prepare myself physically in ways that weren't a detriment to my, overall service goals, and graduating and all that. Prepare myself physically to play in the NFL. And, I'm gained some muscle and, got faster and got stronger. And I think overall, that's not usually a bad thing in the military. So nobody really noticed, but I ended up getting some scouts that had my attention, that were I was on their radar, some NFL scouts, and kind of one thing led to another. Into my senior year, had a good year, and that's when I got invited to the Senior Bowl, then the NFL Combine, and then it was real. And it was like, wow, I could do this. I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to,
Right.
but I could. And it was that was a very stressful process because one, like I said, I didn't really expect to ever play in the NFL. And, if they came to me and said, hey, you got to choose one or the other, like, all right, no big deal. Like I came to the academy, like I'm going to put my uniform on and we're headed out to wherever you send me. I knew that was what I signed up to do. There's no question. And so then a couple weeks before the draft, Coach Belichick got in contact with me, basically told me a few details to, what could happen in the draft, what could happen, like what might happen, what might not happen. But that kind of laid the groundwork, and the Navy looked at it and said, look, if you're on the field and you're playing, like, we're going to give you a shot. You're right off the bat. Like, we're gonna try to make it work if it's a guaranteed thing. I mean, I'm a long snapper. There's only one per team,
Right.
so if I made a team, I'd be on the field. I ended up getting drafted in the 5th round to the Patriots. They stationed me in Newport, Rhode Island, kind of a normal temporary assigned duty that they give recent graduates. For a lot of people, I was back up here helping out at the prep school, and I was driving between Foxborough and Newport, working basically 2 jobs for my entire rookie year. So it was a long, stressful year, but after that, they decided to put me in the reserves. So it's been a little bit more hands off. Got a reserve job. I'm a reserve supply officer. I take a lot of pride that I still get to wear the uniform, that I still get to do that job. But ultimately, it was never expected. This path, this route, and it's crazy that it's still happening. I look at it every day as like, I got to earn it on both sides. I have to learn as much as I can from the military and take it back to football, and I got to learn everything I can from an elite organization like the New England Patriots and take it back to my sailors, and hopefully make the people around me better.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not only do you get drafted, but you get drafted to the New England Patriots. I mean, a dynasty, right? I mean, if you're going to get drafted to any team, wow. And I often think about, you still are in the reserves. So you still are required to serve. I'm talking to you today from reserve duty.
Yeah.
But you also entered into the NFL at a really interesting time where I don't want to say there was friction, but there was definitely a divide between the military, the NFL. Half of the public, frankly, was feeling some sort of way about, there was the flag kneeling, which a lot of people in the military took personally, right? And here you are representing both of those things. Did you feel any of that pressure? And how were you received? And also important to know that Bill Belichick has a deep connection with the Naval Academy. So clearly he understood recruiting you and putting you on the team, drafting you, what a big deal it was. But did you feel any of that when you entered in, when you showed up at the NFL? What was that like, and how were you received as, a kid who was playing for the NFL, but also serving our country in uniform?
Yeah. There's no doubt, like, my tenure with the Patriots has been an interesting time, and an interesting time of transition. We've been in some different, I want to say they're almost, it's like a media constructed battle between, this whole flag kneeling thing and, and veterans in the military. But for me, we can look back and say, hey, this is what's come of it. This is the good that's come of it. This is the, not so good that's come of it. And we're going to come together and we're going to improve as everybody. But in the moment, here I was kind of torn between 2 different sides. I felt a lot of obligation to my brothers and sisters in arms and the veterans that were upset, and rightly so. They absolutely had a justifiable reason, and I feel a lot of pride whenever I get to be out there on the field for the national anthem, or morning colors, goes here on base, or evening colors. You stand at attention, you salute the flag. But as a service member, you also, you raise your right hand and swear an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And ultimately, that is what carries more weight, because that's an oath that you actually, that's what you signed up for. And that means that, no matter what your personal feelings are on the matter, that First Amendment right is still protected. And as a service member, it's still your right. It's that's your obligation first and foremost, is to protect that free speech and to protect those that want to exercise that speech. So, ultimately, my teammates were super receptive of the fact that I have regulations that I have to follow, and we, talked about presenting a united front as a team. And when I'd said, "Hey, look, I have to, stand at attention, because that's, who I am as a military officer. That's protocol and decorum, and that's what I do." They all understood, because I told them, "Hey, look, anybody who wants to protest and to use their voice, I absolutely support you, and I'll fight and die to defend that right." But for me personally, like, I have to stand, because that's who I am. And they were all super receptive, super supportive, and ultimately, I think we've moved forward as a great NFL culture, but also as like a greater societal culture because of it. But yeah, that was an interesting time, kind of having my foot in both doors there, and being a member of both of these elite institutions that were in the middle of this culture war. So that was interesting for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way that you frame that too. Just, that it was you taking that oath. And I respect that. I really like the way that you frame that. Um, so, with the NFL, um, you have responsibilities too, and you ultimately, if you play in the NFL, you have a platform. And one of the things I love about you is that you've used that platform to elevate um, the military community as a whole. If you follow Joe on social media, um, you're an NFL player, but you also know you are supporting veterans' causes, veterans' issues. And I think that it's super important for us to take kind of the background that we represent to any organization and be able to use that and use that for good. And, what ways do you see you serving as an example to your peers in the NFL? Like, have you seen them be receptive to your platform? You talked little bit about like they respected your decision in during, the issue of the kneeling for the flag, but overall, do you feel like you've been successful in using your platform to bring more awareness to the military community as a whole?
Yeah. There's all the outward stuff that the military or that the NFL does for the military. It's November, salute to service month, all that stuff. Like, they have the flags on the field and the service members running out. Like, everybody's seen it, but it's really the work that's done by the players that I want to highlight and I want to recognize, because, for me, I've been a part of those photo opportunities. I've been a part of those, certain events that you just, as a player, it's like, okay, I get, like, my image means more to a lot of people. But as a person and as somebody who's in this military community, who serves and, who associates himself with a lot of veterans, is from a military family, feels very strongly to support Gold Star families and to be there for everybody who's, gone overseas and has come back and are struggling with something. That's something that's very personal to me. And that's something that I've been able to express to my peers in the NFL. And every opportunity I get to talk to my my buddies, it's not, oh hey, like what kind of guns do you shoot or like stuff like that. It's hey, what's going on, with the mission, what's going on over, overseas, what's going like, and there's a lot of nuanced conversation that happens, because they know I have, a background in it, and because every time I get an opportunity, I ask them to talk to, their family members that are veterans, and not just about football. Talk to them about what they did. Talk to them about what their buddies did. Um, get a more personal and intimate relationship with, our military members, so that you can actually help in ways that are more than just an NFL player's image helping. It's doing the real work, because that's what's actually meaningful.
Yeah. You did something for us a few years back. They do the Cleats for a Cause, I think that's what it's called, campaign, where all the NFL players get to wear cleats. They pick the nonprofit, and then the cleats go on auction. And you did some really cool Travis Manion Foundation cleats. And we put them up on auction afterwards and sold them for thousands of dollars. And the gentleman who ended up winning them donated them back to the Travis Manion Foundation. So basically, he made a really awesome contribution and then left the cleats. And we actually have the cleats in our headquarters outside of Philadelphia. We have them in a box. They're we sent them to be put together real nice, and it's awesome. So, and everybody that walks in, and they're big cleats, and people are like, "What are those?" And we share the story of how you did that for us. But um I love the idea, when you think about, again, you're playing for this dynasty, which is the New England Patriots. I mean, it is, love it or hate it, like, you've got to respect the New England Patriots for everything that they have accomplished. And just this idea that you have that platform and you continue to use that, I think it's so important and it's so appreciated. And I know that the military community, most especially, appreciates that you keep bringing awareness to that. So I thank you for that. All right, I have a couple like fire questions for you.
Sure.
When you were young, did you have heroes who played professional sports? You talked a lot about your dad. So I imagine if I were to ask you who one of your heroes was, it would be your dad. But outside of him, who were your other heroes? Who were you looking up to as a kid?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I grew up there in San Diego, so a lot of Chargers. I'd say Junior Seau was probably, one of my favorite players growing up. He was from San Diego, so another guy. And then, yeah, I'd say, besides that, weirdly, like David Binn, the old long snapper for the Chargers. Like I was a long snapping nerd from the beginning. So, as far as sports heroes go, yeah, right there.
Okay. And then you hear a lot about military analogies in football movies and commentary. So I wonder which of those are actually true.
Um, Yeah, it's always a good question, because there's so many cliches, like, oh,
Yeah.
you can go to battle with your, these are your brothers, this and that. Like, it's all a little exaggerated for sure. But I would say the biggest parallel between the military and football is that, we have a mission to complete. A lot of planning went into it. And ultimately you have to do your part, to support the overall thing. It's not going to be flashy sometimes, but at times people are going to need to make big plays and make big things happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need every piece to come into place. So yeah, it's always a tough one. Sorry to give the long-winded rapid
No,
fire
no, no.
response there.
No, that's okay. And when I say rapid fire, you don't have to answer too succinctly. Feel free to expand. Um, on the flip side, so I talked to you about this idea of like, what did the NFL think and your teammates think of you walking on the field, and they're like, okay, this guy's actually like serving in the military. More importantly, because you're still serving, what do your fellow service members think of you playing in the NFL?
Yeah, it's always interesting because like obviously I come in the uniform just like them. Most of the time, they're most people don't recognize anybody's long snapper, even here in New England where the fans are absolutely wild about football and know every one of us. Seldom do I get recognized, especially in uniform. But I'll say some of the coolest moments for me, and this is like the coolest moments of either career, have been when I have kids, like children of my fellow service members, when they come up to me and I get to tell them I work with, and their parents are explaining that I played football in the NFL for the Patriots, and I get to be like, yeah, I do, but I also work with your mom and dad. So like I'm just like them, and they look at their mom and dad like I didn't think you're cool, mom, but like here
Yeah.
you are. You work with the New England Patriot. How cool is that? So that's always been a special moment and a special thing for me when I bring together those two worlds.
So I always kind of tease the guests that are coming out and um, put out a little story that you were going to be the next guest on the episode. And can you think of what the number one question that I got asked that people wanted me to ask you?
Uh, what's it like having the whole world stare at your butt on TV? I don't know. Like I mean, I've been over on different, yeah, but no, good question. I don't know.
That actually was not it, but what it was what is it like playing with Tom Brady and
Yeah,
winning a
that's fair.
Super Bowl with how many Super Bowls have you been in since you've been in the NFL?
So played in three and won two.
And lost one to wait, what was that team you lost to again?
Easy there. This is a friendly interview, all right? I agreed to come on of my own free will. You're
I'm
not paying me, all right?
I'm literally staring behind me on the wall is the cover of the Philadelphia Inquirer from the day after the game. And it just Nick Foles holding up the Super Bowl trophy and it says at last. And I've got it framed in my podcast studio. But I digress. What is it playing like on the field with Tom Brady?
Yeah, no, Tom was a great teammate and an awesome person. He had West Point ties, unfortunately. So his grandfather went to West Point. So um, Army Navy was still a minor rivalry between us. But the guy was as humble and as down to earth as nobody would ever expect because he's Tom Brady. Like, what does he need to be humble at all? But he was just an amazing person, would always take an interest in any of his teammates' causes. And, but being on the field with him and coming in to work with him was definitely intimidating because one, he's the greatest to ever do it, but also you knew you had to step up your game to keep up with him because he was that much more prepared and always ready to go. And he wouldn't mind, reminding you if you weren't carrying your weight.
Yeah. I mean, as a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan from the day I was born, I still and I will say that most reasonable Philadelphia fans, and we have a lot that aren't that reasonable, but most reasonable fans have the utmost respect for Tom Brady at the end of the day. Rivals when he was with the Patriots, but I mean, how can you not just respect his work ethic and everything he puts into the game? It's pretty awesome. Um, so he just announced his retirement, and I was looking and I saw that the average career in the NFL is like 3.3 years. So what comes next for you? Have you thought about what you want to do? I mean, you're young, I mean, and maybe long snappers have a little bit of a longer shelf life in the NFL, but at the end of the day, you're going to be able to turn and shape into a different career. Have you thought about what that looks like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as uh, I think as a Naval Academy graduate, and having two careers kind of this entire time, I've always known that, I have a life outside of football, and I have passions outside of football. But ultimately, right now, I am enjoying playing football. So I have a few more, hopefully, a few more years left in me. But till that point, I'm going to keep, I'm going to stay in the reserves. I'm going to keep doing my part, and keep helping out as much as I can on the in the military community. And then, um, as I see more and more of my Naval Academy classmates get out and start their jobs, it's definitely giving me that realization that, hey, like, life may be catching up with me soon. So I don't know. I've been exploring some options. I've always done some figured out where the path might lead me. I was an econ major at the academy, so who knows? It might be something in finance. But trying to carry on this fantasy job I have right now for a little bit longer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting too. You said you've been working two careers since you've graduated from college, and you hear a lot about NFL players that they go straight from college to the NFL, and that's all that they are. It's what shapes them, and a lot of them have trouble transitioning when they leave the NFL. And I've actually heard a lot of it equated to like military transition to professional sports transitions, that they actually go through the same set of challenges. And you aren't necessarily faced with that when at the end of the day you have a fallback career as serving in the military. And I'm sure you could probably be a tremendous resource to some of these guys that are transitioning out of the NFL, and you think about all of these programs that are in place for our military transition programs. I don't know that anything exists like that for professional sports players.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is there's not, when you're in the NFL, especially for a guy that probably is going to be around that, average, that 3 years, and three games or whatever it is, your life is focused on football 100%. You have to be, or else you're not gonna last. It's a career that requires 100% of your attention, especially in that, those first few pivotal years. So I think guys are coming in, and they're open to having conversations about what's next, and having conversations about investing smartly, and doing the right things along the way. But at the end of the day, like, a lot of people just have to keep their head above water in the building, and make sure they have a job. So it's tough for them to do all those steps to focus on what's next. And there absolutely is a parallel between that and the military, because when you're in the military and you're wearing a uniform every day, you have to focus 100% on that job, or else there are serious and severe consequences if you aren't given that effort. And I'd say the more that the veteran community can help our heroes transition, and we can learn from that, and we can find best practices, the better it's going to be for every other group. When we realize, when you go from something that's very high speed and it's very exciting to stepping back into civilian life and to a corporate job or something like that, it's just different, and you have to be there to support people in that transition.
I always say that there is so much that our population, our public can learn from the military community, whether it's transition, whether it's how to work together. You look at the military community, and I always say, it's like the grand experiment. How do people come together from all different backgrounds and accomplish a common goal, right? And how can we take that practice and move it outside to like the civilian world? Imagine if we were able to do that. So this is just another piece of another way that our public can learn about how to successfully transition into new things. And again, our military community can play a pivotal role in that. Joe, our podcast is called The Resilient Life. It's about moving forward. It's about overcoming life's challenges. It's about getting up when life pushes you down. When you look at what it means, this word resilience, what does living a resilient life look like for you?
Yeah, I think resilience, it's definitely played a pretty serious role in my life. I was very fortunate for a lot of factors growing up, and where I did, growing up and being at least afforded the opportunity to pursue my goals and be able to focus on them. But it wasn't without pitfalls along the way. I there's there's been plenty of those humbling experiences for me where I had to take a step back and reassess and figure out how I'm going to move forward. And they've been numerous throughout. Having to specialize and become a long snapper, and then having to be not be able to be a fighter pilot, just based off of something I can't control, and then having to reassess and not knowing whether I was going to play in the NFL, and then ultimately the challenges professionally that I faced in the NFL and the challenges professionally that I faced in the military, and and the balance of the two really. It's been a difficult road. I mean, it's still been a very it's been a very fun one. But what's there, without a little bit of struggle, and without things being difficult, I'd say, what's the point? You got to have those experiences, and you got to show resiliency to have a meaningful life. And I think that, and I choose to put myself in those challenging situations sometimes, and I kick myself for doing it sometimes, that I take too much on my plate. But ultimately, like I said, what's the point if you're not challenging yourself?
Yeah, I love that. If you're not putting yourself in challenging situations, then what is the point? In order for us to live our best life. So, Joe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all you do to serve our country. Thank you for your contributions to the NFL. I love watching you play. I always, every time the Patriots are playing, I'm like, I know that guy. That's my friend Joe. And thank you for continuing to use your platform and to bring awareness to our military community in the position that you have now. And I hope you continue to do so. We'll continue to follow your career. And thank you most especially for joining us on the Resilient Life podcast.